Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Diplomatic Enclave. I'm your host, Khalid Butt. The International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking was recently held on the 26th of June 2023. It's a very important day, and we try to highlight this day almost every year because of the fact that countries like Pakistan are affected by both the drug use and the illicit trafficking. There is an organization that works in close coordination with our government as well as our Ministry for Narcotics Control in order to highlight all the ill effects of such illicit traffickings and drug use and how to counter those in various ways so as to not affect not only the social structure of Pakistan but also move constructively between the two organizations and build a better society and a better future for our country. To talk more about that, to talk about this International Day and what is the importance of it, what work has been done over the last few years, and what is the message that comes across this year, we've been joined by the country representative of the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime, Mr. JEREMI MILSOM. JEREMI, thank you very much to have joined us.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
JEREMI, we've always tried to highlight this International Day almost every year because I feel not only as an individual but as a part of the media that it's very important to disseminate the information as much as possible, as frequently as possible when we come to this International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking. Now this year's theme is People First, Stop Stigma and Discrimination and Strengthen Prevention. There are so many messages in this one theme. How important is it this year, and what do you feel has been the work done by different countries across the world, including Pakistan, as far as these three important things, putting people first, stopping stigma and discrimination, and strengthening prevention is concerned?
Well, it's important that we have this day once a year because it brings action and it brings attention to the issue, and it builds action and cooperation around the world on the drug theme. The drug problem is very serious. It's as serious as ever. If you see our World Drug Report, there were 240 million drug users in 2021. And in 2011, and that's increased to 296 million in 2023. In 2019, there were 128,000 deaths related to drug use disorders, and if you include drug-related morbidities, that's 500,000 people, so it's a very serious issue. UNODC, we use an interesting metric that's healthy years of life. So in 2019, 18 million years of healthy life were lost due to premature death related to drug use disorders. So this day is really important. It's about keeping the message there, about getting the world to join hands and come up with effective strategies to counter and interdict trafficking, but while helping people with drug use disorders. You mentioned the theme, so people first, stop stigma and discrimination, strengthen prevention. So when people are stigmatised and pushed away, they're less likely to get support, they're more likely to harm themselves and others. If you, again, looking at the facts, in 2019, 39.5 million people worldwide were suffering from drug use disorders, but only about 1 in 5 received treatment. So the message is that people need not be afraid, they need empathy, care and support. You know, people affected by drug use disorders are victims, they're not perpetrators, and if we treat people as victims and they hide, you know, it just benefits the traffickers. It makes it harder for us to unite and tackle the problem. So that's the theme this year, to understand that, you know, drug use disorder is a health problem, it deserves treatment, and it's really important that we understand that and join hands and help people who are affected in this way.
JEREMI, you know, since 1987, the United Nations has, since the year that the United Nations designated this day, there has been a lot of effort made globally, regionally, internationally and nationally as well. If looking back and looking at today in 2023, where a couple of decades have now passed on, do you feel that the coordinated work of the different governments and the UNODC has been sufficient, or do you feel there are certain issues that we need to deal with on a very urgent basis and need to come in order to come to a certain compromise in order to fulfill those responsibilities that have been enshrined under the United Nations?
It's a good question. The fact of the matter is the drug problem is constantly evolving. The types of drugs on the market change, the threats change. So that's why, I mean, UNODC, we're a secretariat entity and we're responsible for the 3 drug control conventions. So all members of the United Nations have signed up to these treaties, so we work with member states to help them devise strategies to tackle the problem. Each year we release a World Drug Report, and you can see how the situation changes. So you can see that, you know, opiates still remain a very serious problem, but that synthetic drugs are increasing. We're seeing, for example, in this part of the world, more threat from you know, amphetamines, methamphetamines, and the number of dangerous synthetic drugs on the market is constantly changing. I think in 2021 there were 1,165 dangerous substances. More are coming each year, and you know, so with this there has to be, you know, countries need to work together on interdiction, on methods to identify them, on techniques to give prevention and education strategies so our children understand the dangers. So it's a constant. It needs constant effort, and we need to
constant
constantly
battle against all of these traffickers, against all of the drug usage that is going not only in Pakistan but across the world. It's a global phenomenon.
It is a global problem, and it's affecting every country in the world, and that's why it requires a joint response. You know, if a drug that's available in one part of the world might become available somewhere else, and so the countries with experience in that, through this system and through UNODC, can, you know, help the country that's newly affected by the drug. So it really requires this constant effort and sharing of best practices and sharing of the experiences that countries have.
You talk of sharing of best practices. Now the theme this year also revolves around treating people who use drugs with respect and empathy. There are 4 important points that are underlined underneath. They are providing evidence-based voluntary services for all, offering alternatives to punishment, prioritizing prevention, and leading with compassion. These 4 points are important. Nevertheless, it's not an easy task to implement them in letter and spirit, especially in any society, including ours, where drug users are looked down upon, are looked upon as outcasts, are not given proper respect. How can you change that mindset?
Well, we're working on multiple fronts here in Pakistan, and I must say we have a very strong partnership with the Ministry of Narcotics Control and the Anti-Narcotics Force and all the other departments at the federal and provincial level in this field. So this year we're doing a drug survey. So we're studying the problem in the country, and that's a very major exercise and a logistic exercise that took a lot of planning. So towards the end of this year we'll have a better understanding of how the situation in Pakistan has changed, and you know what are the threats and how we can deal with them. And then we're working in partnership on treatment standards and quality control. Having a national standard and ensuring that, you know, there's a benchmark in terms of the standard of treatment, and that can be rolled out and everyone can access that level of treatment, which is in line with international standards. There's been commitment here to start to implement opioid agonist maintenance treatment. So that's, you know, world standard treatment and regimes for people suffering drug use disorders based on evidence and best practices. And then, you know, working with schools, education. UNODC has supported and sponsored a lot of evidence-based prevention programs in schools and education institutions. So this is where you get children, parents and teachers working together to understand the problem, understand the risks. And you know, these have been studied around the world, and they show that when implemented correctly, incorporated into the curriculum, it reduces risk-taking behaviour, not only for drugs but all sorts of risk-taking behaviour. So you know, we're working on multiple fronts to create a more friendly environment so people understand the problem, that it's a health-based disorder, and that the people who are affected are our brothers and sisters and children and need our help and shouldn't be pushed away. And you know, when they can access help, then you know, they're not in the hands of the traffickers and the pushers. And so both the education and then hands in hand with the you know, world-class treatment side, we're working in partnership with the government on this.
All right. Let's come to the education part, the last part that you highlighted. I think it's very important because a lot of the students in schools or colleges are under a lot of peer pressure. Sometimes a lot of important persons in their group start taking illicit drugs and then push them to take them as well. It's just like the smoking, you know. One person smokes and you're, because of peer pressure, forced to smoke as well.
Yes.
How can that be stopped in the form of incentives in the curriculum and incentives by maybe having special classes or how should I say, training for the teachers and the students alike with the United Nations? Is that possible? Is this something that you're working on with the Ministry of Narcotics Control?
Yes, it is possible. I think if everyone really understood the dangers and the dangers associated with drugs and some of these new synthetic drugs coming to the market, you know, you'd see much less take-up or risk-taking behaviour. The synthetic drugs really are dangerous, and of course the pushers are saying, oh, you know, they're not dangerous, they're just like an energy pill and so on. But there's different mixtures, and they can have very harmful substances in them. You know, they can be cut with dangerous substances. You get batch mixing issues, so you can get a higher concentration of the drug in one tablet and not in another.
But the fact is, a student would never understand that. A young boy or a girl who's been given one or two pills to take just to get high or for something else would not understand the repercussions.
Yes. And that's why this education is critical. So, you know, I mentioned having children and schools and teachers working together, and these are set programs that have been shown to work, and you have a dialogue and you discuss these issues and you discuss these risks. But the critical thing is adopting them into the curriculum. Is so they're constant. So it's not just a one-off. Okay, you do a program here. And then finish it. It has to be part of the curriculum. So every student, starting from a certain age, has this as part of the curriculum and understands it right through to university level. It's like International Drug Day. Today we bring attention to the issue, we galvanise attention, but it can't be just one day.
Exactly, it has to be 365 days.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is the effort that needs to be made. But another thing that I pointed out in the beginning, and I'd like to point it out again, is a stigma and discrimination against people who use drugs. How can the United Nations, with our government and other governments across the world, move forward in order to decrease this stigma? Because the stigma starts with the family itself. The family gets to know that the boy or the girl is a drug user. They ostracize him. The rest of the family does that as well. The friends do that, the whole social circle, the society does that. And what it does is that it further pushes him or her to go into more frequent drug use.
Yes.
And it ends mostly in tragedy. How can you stop that before it's too late?
Well, we have the prevention tools and we have the treatment tools, and Pakistan's in the process of rolling out friendly approaches for people with drug use disorders. So it's getting that message across that it's a health problem, and the people with drug use disorders that caught up in this are victims. And so everyone needs to understand this, you know, parents, teachers, families. So it needs a sort of whole of society effort. We need to join hands with the messaging, this clear message that, you know, if we help people, if we bring them close, if we treat them with respect and dignity, and, you know, say we're going to help you with this problem and not push you away, then, you know, there'll be a stronger incentive on the person suffering the disorder to move as well. But it requires government, UN, civil society, private sector, media, you know, to all join hands and really get this message to change the mindset of stigma and to one of, you know, stigmatization to support and health.
But you know, it's here that we are talking about it, but it's very difficult to, you know, go and tell families that, you know, you need to be more loving towards your son or your daughter or your sister or your brother who is a frequent drug user, because there is a general psychological reaction to when people get to know that somebody in their family or their loved ones or in their surrounding is a drug user. There's a generalized reaction that is very normal, that people put him, oh, you know, we should not meet him or her, we should not help him or her, you know, he's entered into a rut and we can't help him or her from then onwards. But then it is a collective responsibility of everybody around, whether it be the health practitioners, whether it be the family, because without the help of all of them around that person, nothing can be done in the long run.
Yes. And you're right, and that's why having good services in place, good health services, is important. So, you know, health services is not just the prevention and the treatment, but there's the counselling and education that comes with it as well. So, you know, if we're hoping in the coming years to develop a sort of benchmark centre in Pakistan, a state-of-the-art centre that, you know, has all the services under one roof, and then that would be used as a model based on the sort of newly rolled out international standards for you know, as a benchmark for all centres to follow. You know, there really has to be a sort of revolution in understanding, you know, and it's a multi-pronged approach, as you can see. It's education, it's advocacy, it's treatment, it's you know, having all those services available, guidance, counselling as well.
You know, when it comes to attitude also of people, of those who treat the drug users, of those who are around them, it needs to be non-judgmental, and it also needs to be respectful. But I see a lot of non-respect and a lot of judgment. I'm not just talking of Pakistan, I'm also talking about a lot of countries in the West and in the East as well. Has the United Nations or the UNODC able to change that mindset?
Yeah, well, again, it takes time, and you know, again, you know, we have all the tools in place. We have the understanding based on evidence that it's a health-based disorder, and that with support and treatment, a person can turn their life around and become, you know, that productive member of the family, you know, that they were before they suffered the drug use disorder. So, you know, we have positive experiences and successes around the world, and that's reflected in our report. And we're embarking on this path in Pakistan. And, you know, we see strong will of our counterparts, but it requires effort. We need to work at it and persevere and change attitudes. And this is part of the fight against the drug traffickers, the criminal networks that you know, are pushing these drugs and making profit from everyone's misery. By changing the stigma and taking this approach, it's society joining hands, including those who have become victims by having the drug use disorder, that we can you know, stand up to, you know, the criminals and the crime.
Well, let's come a little bit towards the collaboration that you're having with Pakistan. I recently talked to Nawabzada Shahzain Bukti, the Minister for Narcotics Control, and he talked about some measures that the government was undertaking or about to undertake, but that included rehabilitation centers in jails. He talked about some of them that had been put into effect and others that were in the process. Do you feel these are good measures in order to curtail the use or make people understand, or if they are users, then to help them better deal with coming out of that phase?
Well, it's important, drug treatment, there needs to be a lot of it. So there needs to be a lot of services available to people and with a certain standard. So, having drug treatment centres in all parts of society that needs them and methods is really, really important. And, in prisons too, people are suffering from health issues. And a drug use disorder is one of them.
And this is a global phenomenon. There's a lot of drug use in jails as well. And I'm not just talking of Pakistan. Even in much developed countries, the same attitude prevails. But has, for example, the world gotten together to address that issue?
Yeah. Well, it's part of the duty of care, and there is global agreement on standard conditions in prisons, Nelson Mandela rules, and the duty of care, and so there's a duty of care to people under incarceration. So there is global agreement that more needs to be done. And we see very positive efforts here in Pakistan. We're working a lot with the prison departments in each of the provinces. So there's a global commitment on these issues, and there's work is being done. Yeah.
When you talk of commitments, how do you see the commitment made by the government of Pakistan as far as all the efforts that the United Nations has been undergoing as far as curtailing the use of drugs and also illicit trafficking?
Well, I think I've said it a few times that we're really enjoying working with our partners here. We see that Pakistan is committed to having world-class treatment and standards here, and that's evidenced in the efforts on having new standards and quality control and having education in schools. And on the interdiction side, I mean, Pakistan is one of the countries that seizes more drugs than any other country in the world. It's in the top two countries. Granted, Pakistan is a transit country, so drugs are coming into Pakistan from a source country, and most are being transited through Pakistan, and they're destined for elsewhere. So, Pakistan has made a lot of sacrifice, and by taking these drugs out of the market, it's not only protecting Pakistan, but it's protecting the rest of the world. And so, on the supply side and the interdiction side, we're working as well on with our partners on strengthening, best practices in investigation, in detection, and building cooperation with other jurisdictions around the world. And Pakistan is a leader in the global effort against drug trafficking from the interdiction point of view.
All right. The World Drug Report is also normally released on the 26th of June every year, on the same day against drug use and illicit trafficking. What are the highlights this year?
Oh, well, again, it's highlighting the. I mentioned some of the statistics right at the start. So the drug problem has grown. Part of that's due to population, but not all. So the danger is still there. Opiates still remain the most serious drug because, in terms of mortality and morbidity, 70% is due to opiates. But I mentioned also increase in trafficking of amphetamine and methamphetamine. It shows the diversification of types of drugs and new risks, new dangerous drugs coming onto the market, and the challenge in actually identifying. And also I mentioned earlier in the interview about 1 in 5 having access to treatment. So it's about this sort of inequality in access to treatment, and that because it's a health issue, people having access to treatment, it's a right, and we need to do better and make sure that we have improved and extended health service for people with drug use disorders around the world. So there's a lot of messages in there, about the challenges, and it's available online. It's released today, so people can read it. You'll also see increases in cocaine trafficking, increased dangers from synthetic cannabinoids, and many other issues and drugs, but it's related to the evolving situation. And so this is the part of the process of studying the situation each year, of member states reporting their experiences, of sharing that in a global report, the World Drug Report, and countries can learn from this and understand the challenges and the threats and the evolving methods to deal with it.
All right, Jeremy, there's one thing that I'd like to understand as a layman. This question is as a layman.
Yeah.
In countries such as Pakistan, other countries across the world as well, whether it be Africa or Central Asia or other parts of Asia and the US as well, there are people who get education, go to the educational institutions. There are others who live in villages, in small remote areas, where there are small education institutions or small classes that are held. How can this messaging that you say is online, but a lot of people don't have access to online messaging, how can that message be transferred to that small boy or girl who is learning or getting his education in a small room in his village? How can that message be properly transcribed as well? Do you feel the involvement of local leaders or religious leaders or the imams of mosques in case of Pakistan could be helpful as well, so that they add such messaging in their sermons, whether it be Eid sermons or Friday sermons? Do you feel that could be also an important messaging tool?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mentioned before these methods with schools and families and children together. There are a number of different types of this program for different segments of society, and in fact we do have a model system for families and children in remote areas that might not have access to education, that might not have access to internet. So there are models also that we can adapt here in Pakistan. And as you say, I mean, in a community, then community leaders have to get involved. Religious institutions have to be involved and incorporate the messaging as well, because UN's about not leaving anyone behind, so that message has to reach everybody. And we have methods for community-based care and treatment as well. So we have these models, we have these techniques learned from other experiences around the world. So you're perfectly right. We shouldn't leave anyone behind. We need to reach out to the remote communities as well. Community leaders, religious leaders can all play a part in this important struggle and messaging.
Exactly, and the key point is communication. That communication needs to trickle across all the different sects, all the different communities, the villages, the small areas, remote areas as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in conversation with Jeremy MILSOM, the country representative for UNODC. We'll be back right after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are in conversation with Jeremy MILSOM, the country representative of the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime. Jeremy, so many important issues that and so many important topics that your organization works on. And during the break, we were talking not only of the theme this year of the International Day Against Drug Abuse and International Trafficking, but the fact remains that you also work on many other issues. And there are a lot of other C's in this: crime prevention, corruption, counterterrorism, criminal justice. These are equally important. And I think also for countries like Pakistan, these 4 points are extremely important. And you, I'm sure, must be working with different organizations and ministries for that. As far as Pakistan UNODC collaboration for combating these 4 C's is concerned, how confident or optimistic are you of the outcome that you've had during the time that you've been here?
Well, UNODC, yes, I mean, we're the Office on Drugs and Crime, and we've been talking about the drugs today more than the crime. We actually have 5 pillars. So the first pillar is counter-narcotics, so dealing with all aspects of the world drug problem under the 3 conventions. So, you know, interdiction and the treatment and prevention, as we've been talking about. But we have 4 other pillars. So we're the guardians of the United Nations Convention on Transnational Organised Crime, the UNTOC. So all forms of transnational organised crime, maritime crime, cybercrime, human trafficking and migrant smuggling, environmental crime, trafficking in cultural artefacts. We have the tools and methods to build capacity of government to deal with these wide and variegated issues related to crime. Then the third pillar, we're the Secretariat for the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. So methods to make countries robust and resilient in countering corruption, illicit financial flows and trade crime.
In December, there's an International Day Against Corruption that is
Yes, there is in December, and we mark that day as well. And then the fourth pillar is counter-terrorism. So we're responsible for the instruments agreed between member states in the United Nations to counter terrorism, which is largely from a capacity building and crime point of view. To deal with serious incidents, and also crime prevention and criminal justice, which is more about outreach, access to justice, ensuring people have access to justice and are protected from crime and harm. So 5 pillars. It's a very large mandate, and we have a lot of counterparts in Pakistan and good cooperation on all fronts.
All right, I think that is very important, to have good cooperation and good partners, because without that partnership or collaboration, nothing tangible can happen in any country, whether it be Pakistan, because we're taking Pakistan as an example, we are here, but in so many other countries across the world where your organization works with the government and its organizations.
Yes.
The fact also remains that drug trafficking is something, or illicit trafficking is something that is extremely important to the UNODC and also very important to many governments, including our own. I'd like to refer to the UNODC's Executive Director's message on this on the 26th of June on this International Day, Ms. Gardawali, and she said, and I quote, "We need focused law enforcement interventions to stop drug trafficking and traffickers from feeding on misery." It's one phrase, but the implementation of it all is multifaceted. How does the UNODC go about it, and how has it been going about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked largely about the demand side and the importance for treatment and prevention, but interdiction, stopping drugs from getting on the market in the first place, bringing down the peddlers of misery, the syndicates. This is an important part of our work as well. I think as we've touched upon, there's been an increase in synthetic drugs here. So, these are being, trafficked into Pakistan, and it's changing, the nature of drug abuse in the country, and poses another threat. So, working on the interdiction side is critical. So, we have to ensure that all the various agencies in Pakistan are working together on drug cases, and sharing information real time, not only nationally but internationally, because sharing information quickly on investigations is how you can take down syndicates. Countering not only on borders, strengthening the ability to scan and detect, both through new techniques and equipment, but also through intelligence-led operations, but both on borders and in the maritime realm as well. We've, over the past couple of years, been working in partnership with the Anti-Narcotics Force, Customs, the Pakistan Coast Guards and Maritime Security Agency, under the, in our partnership with Ministry of Narcotics Control to strengthen trafficking in the maritime, countering trafficking in the maritime realm. As I said, you know, Pakistan seizes a lot of drugs and these are taken off the market. But, you know, some are trafficked into the Indian Ocean and through the Indian Ocean to countries, to Eastern Africa, to you know, Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. So the countries all need to develop their relationships, their legal agreements, work together to be able to coordinate on drug operations. So we do a lot of work in this sphere, both with Pakistan and countries around Pakistan, and it makes a difference. It contributes to increased seizures and arrests, and you know, it's all part of the effort and the struggle.
Another program that is making a huge difference is your new country program 2022-2025, which deals with drug demand reduction, HIV, AIDS treatment and prevention. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, our country program covers all the pillars I mentioned. So all those fields, you know, from drugs and all the various forms of crime I mentioned. We built that program to reflect national priorities, so there was an extensive consultation process that went into it. So it's an excellent vehicle if countries want to support Pakistan or support UNODC's partnership with Pakistan. We have the agreed framework with the government to work in all of those areas. So in the prevention and treatment field, you rightly talked about the connection between health and HIV/AIDS and drug abuse. And just this morning I had a joint discussion with the Secretary and Ms. Yuki Takamoto, the head of UNAIDS, my counterpart in UNAIDS. You know, when people take drugs, they have drug use disorders and they inject drugs, then they're more susceptible to these diseases.
Because sharing needles and so,
yes,
so on.
And so we've seen, you know, increases in the prevalence of HIV/AIDS and other diseases such as hepatitis C among that community. So the response is important to tackle that as well, the health-related response. If people who are injecting drugs and have HIV/AIDS have access to counselling and treatment, then they'll reduce the risk behaviour and it'll reduce the transmission, and people can get treated and their health condition improved. So it's all interrelated. So it's important that you consider them together in order to reduce the prevalence of drug use disorders. I mentioned right at the start of the interview the mortality and morbidity. I mean, and how many millions of years of productive behaviour taken away. So, you know, 125,000 deaths related directly to drug use disorders, but up to 500,000. So, you know, 4 times as much related to the health comorbidities such as HIV/AIDS.
Here you're giving global statistics or Pakistan?
Global statistics. So, yeah, we work in partnership with Ministry of Narcotics Control, Ministry of Health, UNAIDS and others to address this important part of the problem as well.
All right. In this program, because it's a 3-year program between 2022 and 2025, what are the objectives that you want to achieve by the end of 2025? What do you want to, that you know, there must be certain, you know, deadlines that you need to, you know, come up with or finish properly by the end of this 3-year program?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good question. Obviously, we want to improve the statistics and parameters related to all the areas we're addressing. So, you know, we want to see increases in seizures of drugs. We want to see improvements in the quality and the number of drug treatment centres and health services that people can access. We want to see improvements in education and understanding of the drug problem. And we have those benchmarks and statistics right across the program in all the areas, and so we're trying our best in partnership with the government to hit some of these goals.
Tell us a little bit about the new drug survey as well.
Well, it's really important because there hasn't been a national drug survey in Pakistan since 2013. So it's 10 years, and it will give us new insight into how many people are now abusing drugs in Pakistan, in terms of how many have just tried versus how many are actually suffering from drug use disorders. It'll give us insights in the types of drugs being abused, and that gives us helps us to design treatment and education programs to target the population. So it's a really important exercise, and I'm very, very much looking forward to the results. And certainly we'll have an event when it's launched to educate and disseminate the findings of that report.
Jeremy, finally, by the time this program is aired, the International Day Against Drug Use and Illicit Trafficking would have passed, but the messaging remains, and that message continues to be extremely important.
Yes.
What would you like to tell Pakistan with respect to preventing and stopping drug use and illicit trafficking?
Well, we have the theme this year, People First, Stop Stigma and Discrimination, Strengthen Prevention. It's really important that everyone stay informed of the dangers. It's a threat, and it can affect anyone. It can affect anyone from all walks of life and society. So we need to understand the risks and work together to reduce the harm it does on society. And I think to do that, we all need to join hands. So, government, as I mentioned, civil society, media, private sector, UNODC. It requires a whole of society effort. So we all need to understand this message and work together to counter it.
Of course, it is a collective responsibility, and the realization needs to come earlier than before it's too late, let's put it that way. But of course, both your organization and the government have been working diligently in that respect, and I hope the results as they have been coming will continue to be more fruitful as far as the effects of drug use and minimizing the effects of drug use and drug use as well as illicit trafficking. So we remain optimistic, and we remain confident of this collaboration between our government and your organizations in that respect. Thank you very much, Jeremy, to have joined us. It is always a pleasure to talk to you, because these are topics that are not only important to your organization and our government, but they are also important for the layman, for the common man in Pakistan, for the young boy or girl that is either studying in a big school university in Islamabad or in a remote village in any part of the country. So the messaging needs to get across, and the information needs to get across in order to build a stronger and more resilient Pakistan against trafficking and against the drug use. So thank you very much, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for having me on your show and giving me this opportunity to raise awareness and bring attention to this issue, and hopefully galvanise more joint action and interest.
Thank you, Jeremy, for your time. Thank you for the information that you disseminated to me and to all of Pakistan and the world through this show.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
With that, we come to an end of this episode of Diplomatic Enclave. We'll see you inshallah next week with a new guest and interesting, important collaborative efforts that have been happening between the organization, that country and Pakistan. Till then, stay tuned, and Allah Hafiz.